Hello and welcome to Lore Watch, a roundtable freeform discussion about lore and your favorite media. I'm your host, Joe Prez, one of several lore-focused folks from Blizzard Watch, and I've got my astounding co-host with me today, Matt Rossi. How you doing today, Matt?
I would rather be your Tales of Mystery co-host.
Well, we got to work up to that. I think
Strange Tales. Joe and Matt. You get to be like, I get to do the Doctor Strange ones, and you get to do the Iron Man one.
You know, I'd be okay with that. I'd be okay with that.
Yeah. Why should you get stuck with Iron Man? We'll get you Spider-Man or something.
No, I'm okay with Iron Man. Tony Stark, during that era of comics, is not exactly, bad. But we're not here to talk about comics this time. We are overdue for a comic episode, and if there's something in particular you would like us to cover, we would like to remind you that you can let us know. As we're going to be answering several questions today, it comes to the same place, whether it's a topic suggestion, a question, or anything in between. You can go ahead and send those in to us at podcast@blizzardwatch.com. We ask that you specify which of our 3 shows it is for, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. If you want to hit us on Discord, we have the Q and Podcast questions channel open up for everybody. You can go ahead and do that. Same rules apply. If you are a Patreon supporter, as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on, we have the Patron Q and Podcast questions channel. We tend to look there first, just as that little extra bonus. But we're going to start, and this is a little bit of I'm not saying a lengthy one, but this is from our friend Vertigree, one of our wonderful Patreon supporters. Greetings, regarders of Rhymefrost. With midnight incoming, I recently saw someone mystified about why a Paladin armor set had Titanic elements and realized that the connection isn't universally known. That being said, do you foresee Hearthstone or original Titan Amethyst, the Peacekeeper, and Paladin card, who specifically says, open your minds to the lights, could be incoming? Furthermore, what are your wildest speculations on the connection between Titans and the light? One interesting thing I noticed is that though no longer the case, Divine Star's original mechanic damage type was Divine, Holy plus Arcane, or Spell Shadow, Shadow plus Arcane, while many Titan constructs, led by Tyr, did Holy and Radiant damage, Holy plus Fire. Well, there's a lot here to unpack, and usually when we start talking about the Light and Titans, I kind of just have to shake Matt like a baby doll from the 80s and set him loose on the ground. So shake. What do you think?
I mean, we know that the Titans and the Light have a relationship for various reasons. We know that, for example, Elune, despite not being a Titan, contributed one of the pillars of creation, the Tear of Elune, and that's. We also know that Aman'Thul didn't like Elune.
Yeah, not very much at all.
And was kind of concerned with Elune's relationship with Aonar, and that Aonar and Elune had some kind of relationship, which in and of itself is not specific, but we do know that it happened. I'm trying to think of the name of the one from that Orgrimmar raid, the last one you do in Pandaria before you go to Orgrimmar.
Oh, Siege of Orgrimmar? Yeah, Siege of Orgrimmar.
It is Siege of Orgrimmar, but it's the part where you're not in Orgrimmar yet.
Yeah, when you start in the Vale.
Yeah, and you get through to I can remember his name, Norishen, maybe?
Yes.
You go up to Norishen, and then he confronts, he sends you into the former Heart Chamber where you confront the big Shah of Anger regeneration thingy there. And he's using the light pretty consistently. Like, he's tossing light around like nobody's business. Honestly, considering their relationship with Elune, considering the relationship Elune seems to have with the Naru, and the fact that a Night Warrior working for Elune could fight and kill an old god, I think the fairness is that the light it's a force of the cosmos. It's one of the things that makes up existence. It's not surprising that some Titans have a connection to it. I honestly don't know that the connection is any different than the connection for any other being that has a connection with the light. Like, I don't know if the Titans just, they just can touch the light and use it just like anybody else can, even though the Titans are macro scale entities. I don't know, but it is amazing to see so many Titan constructs that do touch upon the light in some fashion.
Yeah,
Uh,
there's a lot of element about that where like light is definitely involved and light is definitely seen as a useful tool. But one thing I always wondered in Amethyst was sort of like this weird, I don't want to say a what if, but was kind of like an answer in an Elseworlds to a question that I've been asking since we learned about the Pantheon, which is if we know that the Void wants to make a Void Titan, so we know that in some aspect the powers or element or cosmic force of void can influence a being in a gestational period that could potentially be born as an entity aligned very, very much with void in a titanic scale. Why couldn't the same be true for light?
Honestly, I have thought about this too. I don't want to interrupt your answer, so I'm going to wait, but I do have an answer to it as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're there's a lot of wiggle room here, but it was one of those things where it's like, what if the answer is it already happened, right? What if the answer is there was a Titan that was aligned from that sort of primordial elemental cosmic force that was very close to the light that I don't want to say taught the other Titans how to, but maybe taught them how to harness into the light as opposed to, because all the Titans seem to be able to touch upon other elements besides their primary, at least from what we've seen. Whether it's calling cleansing fire, but also like, being an ability to call upon the light, or whether it is, I can make plants do stuff, but I also can touch things with arcane energy. There always seems to be sort of that element of it where they have the capacity to do more than what their primary programming is or their primary directive, but their strongest aspect is always that primary function. And I always wondered, like, what if there was a light titan that had already existed that Amanthul didn't like? And part of that, I think, is because in my brain, and this is why I thought Amethyst was kind of neat. You mentioned the line that Amethyst says, "We're open your minds to the light." There's a lot of other voice lines that Amethyst says that are ominous in some capacity. So, I mean, you have your typical like "I will not forsake you" heroic moments, the music stinger in the background. But there was another one that always kind of stuck out to me. One of the things Amethyst says is "Be reborn in my image," and that can be taken one of two ways. Either, hey, I'm going to resurrect you like the light does with a lot of beings. We've seen the light resurrect the most unlikely of folks over the years. We've participated in quests that have, in Northrend, that this person was dead and the light raised them up into the light. But could also be you're impure and I'm going to remake you in the same way that a certain Naru tried to do to Illidan. And there might be a world in which a Titan of Light existed and it was just as bad as a Titan of Void because it saw everything and was like, no, this isn't right. It needs to be my way. Not whatever I was programmed to do, but it has to be this and only this. So maybe there's a reason Amanthul doesn't like Elune because Elune's too close to the light, and maybe it's because Amanthul doesn't really care for the light as an entity. I don't know. And now I'm going to shut up and let Matt give his 2 cents because I want to hear what Matt came up with or has about that.
Let's look for a second at how the void interacts with those that call upon it versus how the light interacts with those that call upon it. Because we've seen a lot of people get pretty fanatical in both cases, right?
Yeah.
But with the void, it's always a kind of those that lose their way and become fanatical in service of the void, even when they're not serving old gods or what have you, they tend to become driven by its constantly shifting perspective. The thousand truths, the idea that that there's possibilities are everywhere. You can choose and do what you want to do. Whereas the light can impose or seem to impose its way on people, like what happened with Illidan. But think about, and I always come back to him, Sir Zeliek in Stratholme. And in Nax 40 back in the day. And I guess he's still there, right? Yeah, if you go to Nax right now, he's still there. Zeliek presented a perspective that I don't think people really think about a lot, in that the light is fully willing to be wielded by someone who is not supporting its agenda in any way. Not because he's against it, because he was not in control of himself, but he could still call the light. The light would still come when he called it. He was still capable of using it. And that to me is always stuck out of my head. The void doesn't come if it's not getting something out of it. The void will not help you to suppress the void. The light will. If you're just really convinced, the light will do it. The light will let you look for a second at the things the light did in the alternate version of Draenor when the Maghar fled.
Oh yeah,
supposedly.
Well, yeah, what happened after we were done dealing with the Horde, essentially.
Yeah, Yrel is supposedly using the light to go around conquering the world in a way that on a dying planet is not in any way, shape, or form conducive to the light's goals. What is the light achieving here? What is the light getting? You're revealing the one true way is destruction and slavery? And it's not that the light is opposed to slavery exactly. It's not a moral thing. It's just not conducive. It's like you're gonna end up with a dead planet and dead followers. Dead followers don't help you. It's when I want to say Zadal, and I can't remember if that's her name or not. The one that was trying to change Illidan. When she was hitting him with the power of the light, she said, because as Anaru, she had made the decision to do this. At no point did she say the light told her to do it. She just decided this was what to do. If the light wanted...
Zara, by the way.
Zara, thank you. If Zara wanted to do this versus the light wanted to do it, there's an issue there. If the light didn't care one way or another, was Zara making it do it? Because it seems that that's possible. It feels like the light is fully willing to be used by beings that do not care about it, or even actively presume to tell it what it means, what it's saying. There's a whole lot of fanatics in WoW history. The Scarlet Crusade was using the light, and we know the Scarlet Crusade was secretly led by a demon and had, at its core was completely rotten, but they still called upon the light, and the light still answered them. And that's not necessarily exclusive to the light, in that I don't necessarily see... There's plenty of examples of people like Gul'dan who forced the void to do something alongside a force that the void doesn't normally work with, specifically Fel. And so it's quite possible that you can override either with significant willpower, but the cost seems to be that for void worshippers and void servants who decide to push against the void, the constant battle is one of sanity, of keeping a perspective rooted in what's currently actually happening, as opposed to all the things you see and all the visions you get hit with. And that might be one of the reasons that Velen has visions, because the light is not known for visions. Like, Velen can see multiple alternate futures. That's not something the light normally does.
Can he see multiple, or does he just see what, like, I don't remember if he sees multiple or if he sees what the likely course of they're on, like the linear path.
Well, we see that whole bit where he's jumping through worlds and seeing different worlds. I don't know if that means he's seeing alternate realities or not. That's a fair question. But he does still get all these visions. Is he just getting visions of the most likely path? If that's the case, then we know Anduin's future. It is wild to me to think about. It's quite possible the reason that we've never seen a light titan the way we saw a Fel titan in that image is that a light titan could bend the light more effectively because they're both extremely rigid. The light believes there's one true path. Titans believe in order. Be orderly. If there's one true path, great. That's orderly. Believing that there's only one path and you can predict it. It's how different is that from Aman'Thul's one true way? There's one true timeline. There's one true time way. And is it possible that Aman'Thul doesn't like the light not because it's dangerous and overwhelming, but rather because it presents an alternative order?
Yeah, that's
not the one Aman'Thul is looking for.
That's kind of what I mean. Like it's not necessarily that it's dangerous, but it's a competitor, right?
Yeah, like you want to go do what that thing says, but I already know what we should do based on pure order. And How does one determine this? I find myself wondering a lot about these kind of things. We often feel compelled to look at things from like polar opposites, like light versus void, fel versus arcane. But I mean, there's other forces, and each of those forces has a relationship with all the other forces. So void and order might have just as strong a rivalry, because void is completely disordered. That's not what we want. We want order. So Fel, of course, Fel, its ability to break things down and destroy them, very much opposed to Arcane, which is about, rigid creation. But at the same time, it's not like the light likes the Fel. It never has. It's always been opposed to it. Zera was fighting demons. She was fighting Sargeras and the Fel. That's an enemy to the light. It's also an enemy to the void. And we've seen human beings and other beings can control both forces. Benedictus could call upon the light even while he was serving a void entity. He was serving, technically he was serving Deathwing, but he was serving through Deathwing the old gods and the void. And he straight up could still command the light. The light didn't rebel from him, even though if the light and this is where I come back to the whole idea that these things don't have minds per se, but they're forces. But it's like electricity, although certainly a lot of people think electricity is evil, and has actually a will of its own. Can something have a will of its own but not actually have a mind? To not actually think? It's quite possible that the light doesn't think, and neither does the void. They just do what they do. If I turn the light on in my room, the light just covers everything. It doesn't like check with me if it can do anything. It just does what it does. I don't know. I feel like a lot of the times we kind of make shortcuts for these things because it's a cosmic force. It is, of course, more complex than we're going to understand. And also, because we're playing from the perspective of people who are trying to just keep their existence going, ultimately, when you look at World of Warcraft, whether you're just looking at it from the scale of people fighting or on the scale of cosmic threats engaging the universe, you want to keep going. You want to keep living. You don't want to let a giant titan come in and rearrange your world, and you don't want to just die because rats are in a basement, or because some orcs are burning your village, or because you've put orcs in camps. The orcs don't want to be in the camps. There's always a conflict, and that conflict doesn't erase the other possible conflicts. I really do think that this is, when you say that Aman'Thul doesn't like the light or doesn't like Anar because she likes the light, he might just not like the way Elune goes about it, because Elune is not orderly.
And we've seen that Aman'Thul, even like outside of the discussion of the light, anything that opposes his direct view of what should happen is anathema. It's outcast. Yeah. It's made to be removed, essentially.
Look what he did to Nozdormu.
Yeah.
He empowered Nozdormu, and in so doing, he gave Nozdormu the full awareness that he would die after he went mad and betrayed everything he believed.
Yeah, like with no regard, right? There was no regard, because it was just like, well, you're just going to be useful to me now. Like, and this kind of ties back to part of the other question, which we'll get into after we're done with the whole light discussion. But yeah, it is a very interesting concept. And part of the question, which is, will Amethyst, pop up, or do we see that particular character coming back in the future? Maybe, right? And the thing is, we've seen other things that were introduced in Hearthstone as a joke make it into the main game, because it was...
Yeah, like a lot of the characters are in now.
Yeah, like a lot of the characters that started as Hearthstone only are now actual NPCs that have, in some cases implications in the story, and in some cases have implication on gameplay. They have shown that they're not above expanding what the Titans and surrounding the Titans are. And as a matter of fact, the story of the Titans has been a constant evolution from a early storytelling standpoint to where we are now. And we've talked about this before on the show, but I do think it bears repeating, just sort of as a brief history lesson. When World of Warcraft first was brought onto the scene as an RTS, there was a little bit of a backstory between the orcs and the humans, with the humans essentially having their cleric or priest units, their healers, but they did worship essentially ostensibly a almost Catholicistic system of belief in the that would eventually later become the light. Demons were very much that sort of Roman Catholic belief of what demons are, and then as we moved, it evolved. The Titans existed in like around Warcraft 2 ish as a like seed of an idea, ancient beings essentially that influenced the world but not fully fleshed. Warcraft 3 is when we started to get a little more information about that, and where we started to actually get that solidified, where it was no longer this Catholic belief system. It was absolutely just the light and the void, and those were at the time, the two major cosmic forces that were at play, with everything else sort of operating underneath it. Then comes World of Warcraft, where in the time between Warcraft 3 and World of Warcraft, now you have the pantheon that exists in I'll call it a rudimentary way, because while they were influential on the development of the world, if you go back and look at the original Warcraft manual, which I currently have sitting in my desk drawer where I'm at right now, any mention of the Titans was not as like a godly force, not really back then. They were world shapers, but their purposes and their allegiances were not exactly fully fleshed out. As the game went on, that's when these things started getting their sort of the gaps filled in, and we got to where we are now. They can expand that as much as they want, because at the core of the idea of what we know currently is world souls exist. They are somehow born into the universe and take physical form. We know that they seem to be associated very closely with an element or one of the other pillars of existence of the universe. And all of these forces touch what I don't have anything else to call besides the prime material that we exist in, where we are, where all these forces influence. There could be an infinite number of Titans if they so choose to. There could have existed an infinite number of Titans. Aman'Thul is often referred to as the first Titan, but was he actually the first Titan, or is he the last one standing before he decided to, wake everyone up and put them under his wing immediately? Like, we don't know what happened beforehand, and we do know that world souls can be destroyed. We do know that other world souls have existed in the universe, and from what we know from the Shadowlands and what we know from the brokers and the ethereals, the universe is infinitely expansive. We only know a small portion of it. We know a handful of worlds, but there are doors to other planes of existence, other planets. We've learned that the old gods existed on other planets, which means we can speculate that besides Argus and Koresh, which is a world soul, and other places, that other world souls did exist or do exist. So there is an infinite possibility for them to keep adding on to this roster as they see fit. And with us getting to the last Titan, and again, we've been speculating that this is going to be, it could be about Azeroth, but it could also be about any other thing that relates to the Titans. The last Titan is such an ominous, open-ended thing that it can be applied in many different ways and still be true. We have no clue what's in store for that, which I think is absolutely fascinating. I don't know if Matt has anything else to add to that before we go to the Paladin connection portion of this.
I also think we should point out they made one of the Pantheon of Death as one of those Titan cards in Hearthstone. If the Primus is one of them, right?
Yeah.
So we could right now we have them listed as something else other than Titans, but that's partially just because of the way we know that they were created by the first ones, and because we know that they are effectively less of a being and more of like a mantle that can be passed on. The mantle that gets passed on could be a Titan, just a Titan that is being used has been driven artificially. Because in much the same way that we know the Void wants to create a Void Titan who would be very different than your average Titan, it's quite possible that the very idea of Titanness is normally embodied in some way that it is not in Azeroth.
And that like a world soul is like the organic form of like what we saw with the mechanical forms of the Pantheon of Death.
It could be that, or it could be like if you leave them alone, they turn into this. But if you take them, I mean, I'm going to sound really bizarre here. I'm sorry, but think about Pokemon for a second. If you don't ever use an evolutionary stone on Pokemon that evolve that way, they'll stay the same. They'll like Eevee will stay Eevee if you don't do anything. Like Eevee won't spontaneously evolve. You have to make Eevee evolve. Other Pokemon do spontaneously evolve, and they don't have to be forced. Like for example, Charmander will become Charizard eventually. So it's possible it's similar to Pokemon. You can go different paths with what you do. Like the Titan is a Pokemon, but you could take the Pokemon and essentially expose it to the realm of death and use that to guide its evolution in a certain direction. And that could happen possibly with all the forces. There could be quote unquote Titans for every kind of force. There could be life ones. There could be death ones like that we've seen. Maybe those are Titans. There could be shadow/void ones. Maybe there's straight up arcane ones. Maybe the Titans we have on this world are different because they are exposed to everything.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. But it's interesting to think about the concept of, what if there are Titans or beings like Titans in every reality? We know there are Zereths in every reality, or at least there seem to be. There's a Zereth Ortis.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on there? Why is that? You'll notice that for all his desire to not talk about it, Odyn holds it in reverence. Why does Odyn hold it in reverence? We know nothing about it. Odyn won't talk about it. He doesn't want anyone to go there because it would threaten our view of the Titans' role in our existence.
Yeah, which makes me wonder if that's the place where the plan for the Titans being birthed was what originated, very much in the way that the Zereth Mortis was for the Pantheon of Death. Because
imagine you basically you've got the one concept where we're going to put these spirit beings, these massively powerful souls, in the realm of death to serve as part of the regeneration process for existence. They're going to guide the flow of anima and, husband it and send it to where it needs to go. These ones we're going to throw into again, as you said, that's the only really good name for it, prime material plane, and they can interact with all the different essences as they exist in one place.
In order to shape them into something that is conducive to our plan or
our
conducive
goal.
To what we need.
If the first ones are behind everything, or at least behind the plan for existence, they're going to need people on the receiving end to essentially coordinate all the shipments, for lack of a better term. Like stuff is going and coming from realm to realm. It's all eventually going to this one place to build it. For lack of a better word, it's like if you design a structure and you don't design a central part of the structure that facilitates traveling to the other parts of the structure is useless.
Yeah.
It's separate structures now. You've made multiple buildings instead of just the one you wanted. So yeah, there's a lot possible. There's a lot riding on.
Yeah, I'm still waiting to hear about the Titan Civil War that happened at some point before we all woke up, but we'll see. Let's go ahead and talk about the connection between the Titans and Paladins, because like you said, it's verdigris. It's one of those things that some people don't understand that connection exists, especially if they didn't play Dragonflight. The War Within is, for a lot of players, their first experience, or is their first returning experience after hiatus. And Midnight is going to be potentially in that same capacity. And with Paladins, and in this case, the Army of Light, being so centrally positioned in the story, knowing the connection between the Titans and the Paladins is maybe a little bit important, and maybe, we can talk about that a little bit. We can talk about that quickly, or we can talk about as much as we want, really, because, well, it's our show. But it all stems from their relationship, at least originally, with Tyr. The idea of Paladins, the Silver Hand, is probably, and I think, the oldest Paladin order truly existing in Azeroth. Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know. The Earthen don't seem to have had one. That's not that they didn't, interact with it, but you don't hear about Earthen Paladins.
But the Vykrul did under Tyr.
The Vykrul did under Tyr, and the dwarves, when they came up with theirs, was surprisingly simpatico. It's interesting that it feels like the dwarves were just like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and just started showing up as paladin. Like they didn't like, no, we have a rival tradition. They're like, no, we've never thought about it, but yeah, okay. And then they started being paladin. It kind of makes me wonder about the thing we found out with Magni and Magni's relationship with Azeroth. Is that they didn't have their own paladins because they had those guys, and those guys essentially did the same thing.
Yeah, and when we say that those guys, we do mean like the diamond speakers, because apparently, let's walk that one back a little bit, and we'll talk about the diamond speakers, then we'll go back to Tyr and the founding of Tyr's Garden. But the diamond speakers were entities infused with sort of the essence of Azeroth. They were bright spots of the earthen that essentially spoke for Azeroth to the earthen as a direct interface. Something that the rest of the Titans didn't really seem to like, but they operated very much like Paladins in that regard, as guardians of sort of Azeroth's being, but also stewards of the relationship between the Titan and the people that essentially were closest to her, which I think is interesting that we found out during the War Within that the earthen were those creations, those things closest to her. They were once everything was done to essentially curb their free will and curb the free will of the earthen, the diamond speakers were essentially gone. And so the book that Magni used and the ritual that Magni recited transformed him into one by essence of putting him into direct contact with Azeroth and Azeroth's essence, which had not been done, we have found out, for millennia at this point. So Magni essentially became, instead of a warrior that he was, a paladin of Azeroth in a lot of ways. And a lot of the things he did showcase that. During his time as the speaker Magni, he had access to very similar paladinic powers when he so called upon them. And you can go back and look at the books and comics and everything else that came in between, and you can see that. That's what he does
in Legion, really.
Yeah, he does it. He does it in Legion. Yeah.
It's actually interesting too, because it feels like with those guys gone, with the diamond speakers essentially like gone from earthen / dwarven culture, and the dwarves, basically the ones we have on Azeroth came down with the Vrykul, who would become humans, and with Tyr, Arcadis, and Ironaya. Those are the ones who were leading them. They were essentially earthen from Northrend, not like the ones we see on the Isle of Dornegal. And they
from
were
the Halls of Stone or from the Halls of Lightning in that region.
They're from the Halls of Lightning and Halls of Stone. That they were direct servants of Tyr. They were like not even servants. Servants implies that they were his
companions.
They were like, yeah, Tyr knows the way. We'll follow Tyr. And so it's not surprising that a paladin order founded by people who were remembering Tyr would have resonance with them. Like, they sealed themselves up in Uldaman for a while and didn't get out until the escape of the Trogs broke the area and they left. And so the Trogs that ended up, of ultimately in Gadgetzan were originally in and still are in Uldaman. You see them there. When you go into Uldaman, they're all over the place. They are quite annoyingly there. But the dwarves aren't there anymore. The dwarves left. And when they left, they built first what is now Ironforge, and then eventually they spread out and built other areas, like the Dark Iron went to Blackrock Mountain, the Wildhammers went to Grim Batal, and in their spreading out, they brought dwarven ideas, which were earthen ideas. Ultimately, they're culturally descended from them.
Yeah, they learned what it was to, like, they knew how to live in union with the earth in a way that like the earthen knew how to do. It was essentially a genetic memory, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And while they were certainly much more Clarissa flesh like than the earthen are, then they weren't actually made of stone. They could still reach back and turn to stone. Like, stone form still exists. Stone form isn't just a game mechanic. It exists in dwarves. They can do that. They can reach back and become stone. When Magni turned himself into diamond, he did so by essentially supercharging that dwarven ability to reach back and become more like an earthen, he basically went all the way past it and into Diamond Warrior territory.
Which and now that his story is at an end, he is essentially given that power back to the New Earthen that are born, which I believe New Earthen can be paladins.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's part of the reason why.
And it's interesting that they can be paladins, but it's in a way, as you pointed out, it's sort of like paladins of Azeroth.
Yeah.
And that implies that our modern paladins are paladins of Azeroth.
Potentially.
Like, it doesn't feel like there's a god or a titan involved in paladin orders. Tyr is not a titan.
No, he's not.
He is Titan forged.
A Titan forged or a Titan watcher that was able to wield the light.
Yes, and wield it to the point where he could sacrifice his own hand fighting big ugly evil dragon monster guy whose name is completely. Thank you, Galakron. My God, Matt. But when Galakron is doing his various stuff, which was obviously, now that we've read more, powered by Yogg-Saron to a degree, he sacrificed his hand, and that sacrifice, if anything, only strengthened his connection to the light.
Mm-hmm.
And when he had strengthened his connection to the light in that way, not only were the Dragonflights empowered the first time, but Tyr started realizing, oh, wait a minute, we've got a problem. Why was Galakron not turned into a super dragon the way I was trying to turn him? Because that was where he was going. He was trying to make like the aspects, but one dragon. And it's really funny that tying all of this stuff together, Neltharion and Nefarian were both trying to do the same thing. Ultimately, they were trying to make a super dragon that would be a servant to the void, in much the same way that when Tyr's experiments with Galakron went wrong, it created this horrible monster that was a super dragon that consumed other dragons and raised them as kind of like void zombies. And all of this, like you're saying, okay, what does this have to do with the light? The light and paladins in a specific way seem to be really well suited to fighting this. Like, and have been this whole time. We've seen multiple examples. The fact that the Silver Hand is the oldest extant paladin order on Azeroth is because they had access to a guy who actually bothered to write down what they were doing. The problem with like a lot of other orders is they don't have continuity. Like, warlocks are almost all individuals. You know what I mean? Like, there's no... When you try to have a council of warlocks, they end up turning on each other almost immediately. Even the non-evil one. It's not a thing that leads to let's come together, let's be united. But I think the fact that dwarves were the first group to take up the Silver Hand implies that it's a very much a communal thing. Like you said before, the dwarves know how to live in the earth. They know how to live together in the earth. They are communal by nature. They actually befriended humans. They weren't conquered. They weren't forced into anything. They picked each other. They're like, you're our friends. And that might be because both of them are Titan forged peoples, which implies that the light, because the light is what it is, it's very suited to Titan forged individuals. Like, even if it doesn't have the same goals, it's like going to the house of somebody who has a different religion than you, but they live their life the same way you do.
Yeah, different names, same rituals, so to speak, right? Like, it's, and I think maybe we go a little bit further into Tyr and his connection with the modern day paladins and how that all came about. I think,
and you know what? While you're doing that, I also think it's interesting that Tyr and Norushen seem to have very similar goals.
I would agree. And let's walk it back and just talk about Tyr. He was a Titan Watcher. He was somebody who we're not going to talk about the dragon aspects too much because we've already covered that in a previous episode. You can go back and listen to it should you so choose. You should. But let's start with Loken's rebellion and the fleeing of Northrend. So Loken was another keeper, a Titanic keeper, who fell to corruption of Yogg-Saron, essentially. Many of the others around him were falling prey to this corruption, this mind bending that was going on, with Tyr and Arcadis being the only two who did not fall victim to Loken's schemes. Tyr had always long suspected that something was sort of off with Loken, so he wasn't really caught by surprise because he knew it was coming. But because Loken at this point had essentially positioned himself as the replacement prime designate, Loken was in control of everything, including vast armies of Titan forged, and the facilities to produce more of them were now under his control.
And he had dragons.
And he had dragons.
Yeah, he had the proto drakes that were serving the Vrykul that served him.
Yep.
That's goes back to what we were talking about before, about in terms of like Tyr as a light figure. One of Tyr's best friends ended up cursed from all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a lot of this was based around the light. Like a lot of what kept Tyr and his groups. Like, look, Arcadis is calling on the light too.
Yeah, we'll keep going real quick through this and bring it through because I want to talk more about that. But Tyr essentially hatching a plan to escape Northrend with the Discs of Norgannon, which are essentially an appropriate record of like high magic and the history of Azeroth up to this point. In so much as creating false copies of it to keep the real ones safe, and then fleeing with I believe it was the Winterscorn Vicrul. I can't remember if that was the Vicrul unit, but a unit of Vicrul, a bunch of Earthen that were on his side, Ironaya, which is one of the Watchers as well, Arcadis and himself fled south in order to save the discs. They were pursued by I think the best name that has ever existed, because just the way that Matt loves to say it, which is Zakajaz, a Cathraxi monster.
Zakajaz.
There it is. Who eventually Tyr made his last stand in what would become Tyr's Fall, or Tyr's Fall in the Vicrul language. He would basically become entombed there with Zakajaz's corpse. I'm going to air quote corpse here. The rest of those followers built a tomb and buried Tyr with his foe. They created a shrine to Tyr out of his silver hand atop his tomb as a memorial to his sacrifice. His hammer, the proverbial silver hand, was stored in the tomb as well. And the Vicrul were so moved by Tyr's sacrifice that they settled the region and to guard Tyr's grave forever, otherwise known as Tyr's Guard. Arcadis, Ironaya, and the Earthen and Mechanomes would continue south, settling in Alderaan, which is where we first come across, and I'm going to air quote, the discs, because we come across a fake copy of them. The Vicrul at this point then start, there's sort of like the curse of flesh, right? They start giving birth to smaller, weaker Vicrul, essentially humans. And this happens both in the north and where they've settled in Tyr's Fall. They carry on the tradition in Tyr's Fall of the light bending order, of the practices of truth and justice and protection and protecting those weaker to them that Tyr was all about. They have this as their core belief system. And Tyr's Fall guardians essentially at this point become not the mages, but the actual people of the region sort of become successors or a family lineage of paladins in Tyr's name. Vicrul then in the north, who instead of killing their children at the order of their king, some of them flee and bring their children down to this promised land of myth and mystery, hearing of this land that Tyr had basically founded, and dropping off their human children here. They would eventually grow up in these traditions with the Vicrul tales of Tyr and other stories of their culture, and it would keep essentially evolving from generation to generation. The origin of the tale was eventually lost. Tyr's story essentially became, I don't want to say obfuscated, but it essentially became a much
simplified.
more simplified mythic tale that was used by the Tyr's God, or Tyr's Guard, this first and ancient order of human paladins that were guarding this tomb. And so this is sort of like the birth, as far as I am really concerned, of true paladins in the game. Now, it's happened elsewhere, but that tradition of those that followed Tyr carries forward, whether it's with the dwarves that followed, or the earthen that became the dwarves, whether it's the Viking who followed who became the humans, or whether it is those that were around it or followed in the sort of generational wake of it. These are paladins. And so they are always tied to Tyr and Tyr's essence, which means paladins as a whole are always tied to Titanic and Titanic order, no matter what way you slice it. So
yeah, and it's also to be pointed out that there's modern paladins who draw their date back to the First and Second War. That's the origin of that order of the Silver Hand. But they're inspired by the legends that we've already just talked about. They weren't in a vacuum. There just wasn't a tradition that touched the light in that specific way after the death of Lordain, who was friends with Arador, and who was essentially, his people were the ones preserving the, Tyr's legacy, because they were the ones who were guarding the tomb of Tyr. They were the ones that lived in Tirisfal. They were the one who built Tirisgard. And that legacy leads to modern paladins in much the same way that various legacies of magic users effectively lead to modern wizards, modern mages, and modern warlocks. It doesn't mean that people in the past called themselves that, but they were still basically that. Especially Lordain and his. They're even mentioned if you go and look back at the history of the formation of the first human empire. It's Lordain and his people are the shield that secures them. They secure an alliance, and they're the shield that effectively protect the entire army. They are, by everything except word, paladin. So yeah, it goes back a long way, and there's no doubt that Joe is right in that it is inherently linked to Tyr, and it's inherently linked to Jotun, because everything you think of as the central trappings of modern paladins is ultimately designed by Jotun. Jotun is the one who builds Tyr's new hand made out of silver. Jotun is the one who essentially changes Tyr's hammer by putting the silver hand symbol on it, turning it into the silver hand. Jotun is the one who helped them escape with the discs of Nerganon. He specifically stayed back to fight Loken and his Kithraxi servants, including Zakajaz.
And if you've never seen
whenever I say Zakajaz, I imagine the
jazz hands.
Tendrils.
Yeah,
but it's the tendrils on its face doing jazz hands.
Just to sort of like recap who Jotun is. Jotun is a Titanic watcher that if you've played through Northrend, if you've played through Wrath of the Lich King, there's this broken road called the Path of the Titans. And particularly in Dragonblight is where you can find a long trail of it that leads, through Dragonblight into Crystal Song, and then all the way down to the waters of the Northrend waters of ocean there, and into it. You can actually see pieces of it. He walks along it, and there is really nothing that you can do with him at the time.
Until Legion.
Not until Legion. But we do we do know what Matt said, where he replaced the hand of Tyr that had been severed by Galakron, and he also added the symbol to the hammer of the silver hand. Jotun is who stayed behind, and instead he stayed behind to distract Loken and help mask his allies' escape. He was captured and cursed, which is what Matt alluded to earlier. To shatter the anvil he used to craft Tyr's hand and reshape his hammer, and to attack any allies of Tyr, but the curse would not let him die. And then during Legion, Jotun killed Galford, who was carrying the spark of Tyr. Lanagosa, I think it was, and the Paladin champion during the Order Hall stuff tracked them down and were forced to attack Jotun in order to regain the spark from the Watcher. And during the fight, Jotun comes to his senses, unable to die and fearing for madness. He gives you the spark, which allows you essentially later on, not until Dragonflight, it's part of the reason we're able to get Tyr back.
Yep, and Lanagosa, by being a dragon, which if you didn't tell, Lanagosa, blue dragon, because she's a dragon, it's interesting that she's basically working for the Silver Hand the whole time. Like from the moment you meet her, she's straight up working for them. It ties back into that whole idea that you can't get away from this. Tyr and Tyr's legacy is inherently connected to the Paladin orders of Azeroth. Both the Dwarven and human orders come directly from Tyr and Tyr's legacy. The other ones, the Elven and Tauren ones, are not. Although the Tauren one is pretty interesting on its own, as is really the Blood Elf one. We're gonna hear more about in Midnight. There's no way.
Yeah,
that's coming back up.
The interesting thing, though, too, and that I think that's why this is sort of important too right now, is because we are moving into Midnight. We are going to get a lot more about the Blood Elf Paladins and how they view things, especially because of the relationship with Eretor and his father, and that the Army of Light and them coming to the aid of Silvermoon and the Sunwell. But I think it's going to go beyond that, because really, and this is not spoilers, this is something that we've known for a while now. It sort of challenges the idea of what a paladin is. And why that's important is exactly what Matt was kind of getting to with all these different offshoots of paladinism. Whether you are a Tauren Sunwalker, or if you are a Night Elf Paladin, please give me Night Elf Paladins. No matter what your tradition is, you at your core tenets of belief want generally the same thing. Your warriors protecting others, essentially. You're wielding power in a way that is a shield and bulwark for those around you, which is this: you go to war, you can fight, you will destroy if you have to, but it is not your first choice. And all these traditions, while they all stem from the same thing, is one of the, it is the core ideas that Tyr brought forth. Tyr was a protector. Tyr wanted to protect. Everything Tyr did, with even the making of Galakrond, was an attempt to help safeguard the world even more. It was sabotaged and made corrupted, but that was the intention of it. And then it led to the dragon aspects, which were created in the Dragonflights to protect Azeroth. You see where I'm going with this? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. It all stems from that. And some of these factions have it in their head over the course of years, and we've seen this with the legacy of Tyr as distilled down, and this is actually a theme from Dragonflight and Tyr's Guard and the Silver Hand with Legion, and like a sub-theme of the Legion Order Hall stuff, because I did do the Paladin stuff. But there's this, everybody thinks they're the right tradition to some capacity. And while they recognize each other, they don't necessarily immediately accept each other. And that's not
but
what...
It does seem that paladins have the easiest time ignoring massive differences. Like the Zandalar paladins and human paladins can actually seem to be like, okay, we hate each other. That's fair, right? We hate each other. Yeah, oh yeah, I hate you. I hate you, but we really hate that more, right? Oh yeah, we totally hate that more. Let's go kill that, and then we can discuss how much we're going to kill each other. I am okay with that. And it's one of the things I've always liked about paladins in WoW, is that you can have the Blood Elf paladins right there next to dwarves and humans and Draenei, and they're like, yeah, sure, we did something bad once, whatever. We all agree we hate that, right? Yeah, we absolutely do. Okay, let's go kill that. I like that about paladins. I think it's something as somebody who plays primarily warriors, I always wish we had, was that kind of camaraderie. It's just really cool in WoW.
Yeah, and I think we're going to start to see an evolution of that as the core concept of what it means to be a paladin is challenged and discovered. I think they're all going to sort of discover that together. And I think that learning about the roots, because that's the other thing that hasn't really happened yet, too. Like, we just finished Dragonflight. Dragonflight really hadn't wound down too far before we were immediately in the War Within with an explosive and sort of breakneck pace. And then
I totally agree with you on that one.
And then from the War Within, we're going right into Midnight, which means all the stuff that was learned, because one of the things that I think was interesting at the end of the Tyr storyline in Dragonflight is that the Tyr's Guard even said, like, maybe it's time for us to go out and see the others that carry our name forward, right? It was, maybe we should go and check on everybody and just kind of see where everybody's at, because the Tyr's Guard was made up of all walks of life. They didn't care what race you were. Did you honor the ideals of Tyr? Did you want to protect the world? Great. Come on in. So they're a lot more inviting as far as that goes. They're a lot more close to the core concept of it, and having them sort of walk the world and sort of interact with these folks, like, it would not be out of the realm of possibility that they go and deal with the Zandalari and learn about their traditions and how they become paladins and what it means to them, and, you know, bring them in and learn more about it and teach them about, hey, this is where our paladin order started from this guy here. I could see them going to the Sunwalkers and having that same discussion. I can see them going to the dwarves and going to, you know, literally any of the other factions and finally sitting down. Like, I could see tensions between the Army of Light and the Blood Elf Paladins coming to a head, you know, at some point after everything calms down, after our crescendo moment is done. And then one of these Tyr's Guards stepping forward and telling everybody to shut up. And, you know, your paladins, what are you doing? Like, you've sworn to protect, you've sworn to wield your light or your power in a way to protect others. Start doing it. I don't,
especially since, it's a good point that the Arathi have their own paladin tradition.
I was just going to say, and going to the Arathi, and we know we're going to go there at some point. Like, it's inevitable.
Yeah. Even if they don't actually go to them, to that realm, the expansion, they're going to be involved. We're going to see more of them. So yeah, absolutely.
It is absolutely, like, if the Tyr's Guard hear about the Arathi and the Arathi tradition, 1,000% somebody is going to go and visit them. And, like, they're going to be hard pressed to tell a warrior of the light, no, you don't get to walk on our shores. Like, it's an interesting position to be in as far as the paladins are going into this expansion. And I'm actually fairly excited to see how that grows. So when you see the paladin armor that you're getting for your tier set, and you see the Titanic accoutrement upon it, there's a reason for it. And there's a very good reason for it. And it will probably come back in the third act of this expansion trilogy to even further explain a little bit about it. Because that's the other thing too, right? Tyr's back. Tyr is alive again. We brought him back. Spoilers if you didn't finish Dragonflight. Sorry, it's over an expansion. He will likely be there with us, if I had to hazard a guess. Because if the Titans did something that's messed up or needs to be dealt with, pretty sure he's going to have an opinion on that. Because Lord knows he's got an opinion on the other ones. Also, if anybody's going to put Odyn in his place and snap him out of his megalomaniac funk, it's going to be Tyr. They were battle brothers, right? They fought Ragnaros together.
Tyr is the one who is actually intended to be Prime Designate. He was the one who was going to be it, and it's his own decision that he didn't. If anyone, there were three who were essentially equals. There was Master Ra, who we call Ra-Den. There was Tyr, and there was Odyn, and each of them had their strengths, but everybody, like, Tyr's naturally a leader. People just follow him because he's capable of conspiring.
Well, it's like they say, the best leader is the one who doesn't want to lead.
Yeah, and he was the one who led from the front, and as a result, Odyn was always a little jealous of him. And it's really interesting how the three of them embody different aspects of Aman'Thul that way. Aman'Thul was a good leader, and people liked following him, but he was also jealous. We see that with Aemnar and Elune.
And we see that with his reaction to the light.
Yeah, and also Aman'Thul, like Ra-Den, was just fascinated with discovering things and uncovering them. And in a way that's very Ra-Den. The idea of, like, making elemental planes to hold the enemies so they could then, the elementals, so they could be held away so they could fight the old gods directly. That's an Aman'Thul idea. And as a result of that, I always think it's very interesting that the three of them, it's almost like they had to be split apart they had to be pushed into antagonism so that there could be any chance for Loken to do what he wanted to do. In a really real way, Yogg-Saron and Loken's, their plan was doomed as long as Tyr was there.
Mm-hmm.
Because he would be like, no, Odyn, you cannot just go off onto your own plane of existence. We're supposed to be here. It's a fascinating idea.
Yeah, because of all the ones, if Tyr told Odyn no, Odyn would listen.
Odyn had no choice but to accept the dragon aspects, which he hated, because Tyr was like, no, we're doing this. We're doing this. This
world like, I don't like
protectors.
Yeah, and he's like, I don't like it, and I'm gonna still do my own thing, but I trust you.
Yeah, you and I fought together. When my face got melted off by Ragnaros, you were at my side. You're the reason I didn't die. So all right, I'm envious of you, but I will listen to you. And it's weird. I don't think it'll happen. For one thing, I think Rodden is just way too far gone at this point. But I would love to see the three of them riding again at the end of this, when there's the big final whatever fight in the final Titan.
But that's the thing.
In the last Titan.
That's the thing. I think we're potentially on pace for that, and I think that's one of the most fascinating things, because when we go to confront the Titans for whatever their transgression is, which we still haven't uncovered yet, but we know we're going to get there, that having them with us just feels right. Like having Odyn like get over his pride, these puny mortals that we've proven to him are better than anything he's constructed, right? Like we've bested it to the point where at one point he made you his Pokemon. There's a reason he made you his Pokemon, right? He didn't suck out your soul and shove it into a mechanical body.
If for no other reason than I was an exceptionally good Pokemon, that jerk really should have been nicer to me, because I'm the one that got him his gym badges.
Yeah, but I mean,
I'm sorry, I have trauma.
But having Tyr get those two out of their funks and saying, "Pick up your hammer, pick up your sword. We're going. They need us, and we swore to protect this planet. We gonna go protect this planet." Like having
them really weird. As you're talking about this, do you know what you're reminding me of?
What's that?
Medivh.
Yeah.
King Lane, and good old fashioned Ashkandi wielder himself.
Mm-hmm.
The three of them, the brothers that fought and then eventually got separated. It's like a cosmic
parallel.
It's like a Mandelbrot set.
Yeah.
Where you fractal go up and fractal go down, and there it is again. And it's very similar to the relationship between Sargeras, Agrimar, and Aman'Thul.
Yeah.
Sargeras and Aman'Thul were like brothers. Like they were so tight, and then it all fell apart. And Agrimar, who was like the younger brother following them around, stayed with Aman'Thul, but he was never the same. He was like, I got to go find him. I got to go get him back. We don't work like this. So yeah, it's weird how you go up to the max level, and there they are again at the smaller but still godlike level, and then you come down to our level, and there it is again. It just keeps happening.
And let's not even forget about the original of Kil'jaeden, Archimonde, and Velen.
Yeah, the triumvirate. Yeah, the Draenei triumvirate. There
which again, Archimonde, who that sort of that same Archimonde, Velen, and Kil'jaeden in their forms before two of them fell to become Eridar, or the equivalent of the fallen Eridar,
the demonic ones. Yeah.
Yeah. They embodied two of those aspects the same way that the others did, with Velen taking on the role of more of a Tyr role, right? Like he was the natural leader, the one that didn't want to lead. Kil'jaeden, the Deceiver, was actually really an arcane genius who wanted to unravel the mysteries of the universe. Like that was his thing.
His betrayal was almost less of a betrayal and more of a just, I got to see where this goes, man.
Yeah, and then you had Archimonde, who was the warrior, who was the brash one, very much like Odyn was. Like you have these parallels, these triplets of personality that were all cohesive units at one point. It is a theme that repeats itself at multiple cosmic levels, and maybe that's just storytelling accident that happened. Maybe it's coincidence, or maybe that's a purpose. Maybe that's reverberations of the cosmos of how it's supposed to be.
Can be both. I mean, you could start it accidentally, but now that you see that they're all there, you can make use of them.
Yeah. Blizzard, if you use that one, just make sure you credit us. Thanks. But I think that's going to do it for us today, friends. I do want to remind you that Blizzard Watch is made possible due to your generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Your continued support means that this podcast site and community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to our podcast, better chance at having your question answered on our podcast with a queue, and an ads-free site experience. Would like to remind you that if you have a question for us or a topic you want us to cover in depth on one or any of our shows, we encourage you to send those into podcast@blizzardwatch.com. We ask that you specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as inside of the email or communication, putting any special pronunciation of your name. You can also hit us on Discord. We have the Q and Podcast Questions channel, which is open for everybody, and same rules apply. And if you are a Patreon subscriber, you can go ahead and hit us up on the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel, where we always look there first as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. As a reminder, if you cannot support us on Patreon, we understand times are tight. You can also sign up for Patreon at a 0-tier level, where it will get you access to our newsletters. That does actually help as well. You can also make sure you share our content with anybody you think might enjoy it, and make sure you comment on it, send likes and all that other stuff. I know you're probably sick of hearing it from every, platform out there and any content creator you have. But the reason we do it is because it does actually make a very big difference on whether or not our content shows up for people that may enjoy it without you directly linking it to them. And it is paramount to help us continue to be here. But with that, friends, I do thank you very much for joining us on this Titan-filled Paladin adventure. We'll see you next week.